Welcome back to Today. Now, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation is calling for peace in Israel and Palestine. Now, this follows the latest conflict that has killed hundreds of people. The department says urgent intervention is needed to find a long-lasting solution in the recent devastating escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. DIRCO Director General Zane Dangor joins us this afternoon for more on this. DG, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Let's perhaps start with the view that DIRCO holds here on a more specific level about these latest devastating developments that we've seen go down over the last few days.
So I think the most important thing is that the loss of life, particularly of civilians, on both Israeli and Palestinian civilians, is regrettable, and it's also unavoidable, and I'll expand on the unavoidable part a bit. We believe that while the attack may have been the scale of the attack is surprising. The fact that an attack has taken place is not that surprising. Given the events of the last year, the cruelty, the inhumanity, violence against civilians, the repression, all that accompanies an illegal occupation that has been taking place for close to 5 decades, if not more, has led many to believe that given the lack of accountability and the lack of voice from Palestinians, that some kind of counterattack would be imminent. That being said, we don't think that any form of violence, irrespective of the justification for it, is in the interest of the Palestinians or the Israelis at this stage. And this is why we're calling for immediate de-escalation, for an immediate ceasefire, so as to spare more civilians from being killed unnecessarily. This would necessitate the international community ensuring that the Israelis and the Palestinians come together for meaningful talks towards a just and peaceful, a just solution to the occupation. And I want to underscore, the word just. Just does mean that the occupation must end. It does mean that the annexation of land through the use of force must end. It does mean that the final status issues must be agreed on. They've been being discussed and debated for decades. That includes the right of return, the status of East Jerusalem, and many, many other similar factors. That unless these issues are dealt with and dealt with speedily, you'll always have conflict. The fact that you've had an occupation for so many decades means that there's always occupation, as we say, is not an accusation; it's a statement of fact. The ICJ has ruled on this. The fact that you have a occupation does mean that you have a violent conflict there. It's just that the severity of that conflict differs over time, with some very short interregnums of peace. But there is never a just peace or an end until the occupation ends.
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
That's the position that we hold.
Yes, and my apologies for coming in there, DG, but it's an absolutely important point that you raised there, that despite whatever is happening on the ground, any level of violence is absolutely unacceptable. So in calling for that immediate intervention that you have called for, the ceasefire, peace negotiations, if South Africa were asked to be part of an international stakeholder base to engage the parties involved in this conflict, would South Africa participate, and how exactly would South Africa navigate those negotiations to find a sustainable, peaceful solutions in both regions?
South Africa, if we are asked to be part of any solution, we would be we would happily oblige. But we know that an initiative like this will require many stakeholders. It will require South Africa, Egypt, at the very least. It will require the US. But we feel that at this stage, given the dynamics of the last year, and given the dynamics even with previous peace talks and the failures of these peace talks when they were led by what was called the Quad, which includes the US and Egypt, amongst others, that we need the UN to play a more central and meaningful role to convene these discussions, convene these negotiations, put in place a roadmap towards achieving this just and lasting peace. As I stated, that we need this roadmap that will deal with, what territory is it, the 1967 borders that will give rise to a two-state solution, which is part of the international, configuration at the moment. But as many analysts have pointed out, that the Israeli government has imperiled the two-state solution. So some are talking about a one-state solution where founded on the basis of the human rights of all who are legally, who have the legal status to live in the territory. But that being said, the Israelis and the Palestinians must define that. We will play a facilitative role. We will work with other role players, and we will bring to the fore the experience that violence is never a solution. That dialogue and diplomacy is always a solution. That being said, we also recognize that repression will always give rise to forms of resistance, and resistance in some cases may be violent. And we want to avoid all forms of violence. So we will work with whatever stakeholders are called to facilitate these talks, and we will try and bring in the UN as a central player.
Thank you very much for that update, DG. And of course, we will continue to engage you over the coming days, because even though there is that conflict that has infringed on the rights and the human rights of some people there, any form of violence is unacceptable. And of course, as we've seen over the last few days, the loss of life there as well. That is DIRCO Director General Zane Dangor joining us this afternoon.